Hey folks, thanks for stopping by and checking out the Business Line podcast. In this show, what we're trying to do is get in front of people all over the country, all over the world that are moving and shaking in business, whether they're a part of a big business or they're starting something from the ground up. We want to get to know them. We want to get to know their journey, their struggle, and a little bit about what they love in life. We hope you check out every episode you can. All right. Well, hey, Tim, welcome to the Business Line podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And thank you for having me on.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're joining us from Canada today?
I am. I'm in the sweltering Canadian capital, Ottawa, and it's a toasty one today.
So what do you guys got for temps right now?
Well, we're working in Celsius, unfortunately. So,
okay.
But we're looking at 45 degrees with the humidex Celsius.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we have offices in India, and I'm talking to our teams over there, and recently they've been 120 plus Fahrenheit, and I just can't imagine. Just cannot imagine. And, we've got the air conditioners blowing like crazy in the office, and I still see my team sweating. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Get those guys.
Okay, so you're making me feel better. Okay, we're not in Bombay.
Yeah. So anyway, hey, super excited to get a chance to meet you and talk a bit about the cool things that you're doing. So tell me a little bit about LegalWills and where you guys are right now. I know you guys have been around a long time, since almost the dawn of at least the visual internet, as things started to get exciting and, post 2K. But tell us a little bit about LegalWills, bring us up to speed, and let's see where this conversation goes.
Okay, so let's start with the legal industry. So this all came about because myself and my business partner, we used to go for after work drinks with a big major telecoms company. Every Friday evening, we'd go out. And then one day there were a whole bunch of us sitting around a table, and somebody said, you know what, I really need to have a will. And I haven't written one, and I'm an adult and I have children, and I should have a will. And we went around the table. There were 14 people around the table, and not one single person had a will.
Yeah.
And everybody knew it was important. And we were professionals, children, good jobs, houses. We were responsible in every other way, but not one single person around the table had taken the time to prepare a will. And we knew that there was a problem with that. And the legal industry wasn't making it convenient or affordable or accessible for us. And it wasn't necessarily just about the price, although we can talk about that, but it was more like making the process available to us. And so you're right, this was around 2000, 2001, where everybody was trying to be creative in terms of putting things on the internet. And there were various successes and failures of trying to do that.
So did you get in before .com bubble burst or just after?
We were around the time where people were still optimistic about putting things on the internet. Mm-hmm. But we were also at that time where people were throwing money at different ventures, and different ventures that weren't viable.
Right.
And so we wanted to take the view that we were looking to create a business that was sustainable. It worked as a business. Mm-hmm. And it always annoyed me a little bit where people back at that time would talk about, oh, you've started a great business. That's a good idea. What's your exit strategy? It's like, exit strategy? I've only been doing it for like a couple of weeks. Like, why do I need an exit? Right. We were never about coming up with an exit. We were always about trying to, okay, let's get to revenue. And I read recently, somebody was talking about the world of difference between a business and a business with a paying customer. And we wanted to have a paying customer and get to having a sustainable business model. And so that's what we set out to do. Now, we were fortunate at that time that we were able to overlap a little bit from our big tech careers and our side hustle, if you like. We were very much, we bootstrapped from day one, and we've turned it into a very viable business now, off our own initial investment of the two co-founders who we're now still CEO and CFO 21 years later.
Wow. Getting started back then, what were your biggest obstacles?
So timing to market, I think, is the key, because we were ahead. So we launched it. It was a viable business. All we then had to do was convince people to type all of their personal details into the internet to prepare a legal document, where when you're the first and when you're disrupting, you're going to hear a lot of people tell you why that won't work. And particularly from the legal community, you're going to get a whole number of lawyers saying that's not a legitimate way to write a will. I've never seen something like that before. And it's like, well, no, we're the first.
And back then, right now it's commonplace. Everybody just puts all their stuff on the internet and almost doesn't think about it anymore, even with all the security things happening. Back then, it was like, there's probably that big group of people that just did it to do it, and they didn't really even think about it. But everybody else is like, I'm not putting my stuff on there. So you really had to convince people to take that next step.
Yeah. So a couple of things happened that helped. Firstly, after we launched, in the few years after that, tax preparation software became mainstream. And we have a very similar model of operating to tax prep software. So now we can say to people, look, it's like using, Quick Tax, H&R Block, Intuit, those programs to file your taxes. We're somewhat similar, but we're for a will. So that helped. And also over time, and eventually we had some decent competitors come along 10 years, 15 years later, and that meant that we weren't just trying to shout into a chasm on our own. We had other companies saying, yeah, this is legit. This is a good way. And now, instead of just being the only company, we now have to be the best company.
Right. So how do you do that? I mean, were you able to piggyback on some of those bigger competitors with maybe a little bit deeper pockets to kind of open that well up? And as people are searching for those things, you're showing up too. And here's another option, because people like to check out options. And then when they check you out, what's even then or even now, what's that differentiating factor that makes you guys better?
First off, we have longevity. Nobody can beat our longevity. That's the one competitive advantage that we're always going to have. And with that longevity comes social proof. You get a lot of reviews from customers. So over the years, we've accumulated thousands and thousands of 5-star reviews that help with our credibility as an organization. And we still like to be the best and the most affordable. And so we've offered a service that we've developed over the years. We still have a backlog of features that we're trying to develop into the service to continue to keep us ahead of everybody else. We're still a very nimble company. If we have an idea for something that we want to do, we can develop it very quickly. So we still remain, I think, we're still the most capable, the most complete service of this type. And we're still the most affordable because we don't have to charge any more than what we charge. So you can get into, it's an interesting discussion about how you set a pricing for software as a service, because ultimately there's no cost to our service, but we have to set the right pricing to make it still affordable. But even though we cost less than everybody else, we're actually better than everybody else. So don't think that you're getting less because you're paying less. So there's that dynamic as well that we have to address.
So obviously back in, I'm just I talked to a lot of folks that were moving and shaking back in late 90s, early 2000s. And what I like to remind myself and our audience that's watching and listening is, because some folks don't realize this, if they're 10 or 15 years younger than me or whatever, there wasn't Wi-Fi back then. People weren't running around with smartphones getting access to services. People had, they had their desktop computers we're talking 2000, they weren't even flat screens yet. They were taking a bunch of room. The format of these things is different. The way you accessed the internet was much, much more cumbersome. And the experience of being on the internet wasn't like it was today. The media wasn't there. The ability to share, if we build a service online now, we can incorporate video and animation and learning tools that can onboard a client and prepare a client to use our service more effectively, solve their problems, and stick with us longer, right? Back then, it's a different ball game. So starting back then, did you have somewhat of a technical background? Did your partner, did you guys bring people in internally? Did you outsource that? And as that's evolved throughout the years, how have you guys been able to keep up and stay competitive that way?
So we've done a number of refreshes to the website. So we do that periodically every probably 3 or 4 years. We try and do it before it starts to look too tired. And absolutely, if you look at our website from 2000, 2001, it belongs in the Smithsonian. I mean,
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that snapshot.
Once in a while we look at it, and it kind of makes us all nostalgic.
Yeah.
But the actual, the service itself wasn't a high bandwidth service even then. We didn't have video animations, things like that, but it fundamentally worked. But it was right on the cusp of, we had a 1 meg modem came out in 2000, 2001. It wasn't, not everybody was on dial-up. It wasn't brutal. There was a transition. If we'd been doing it in 96, 97, maybe. That would have been, but 2001, 2002, we were starting to see better connectivity, certainly in cities around that time. But you're right, you weren't doing it on your StarTAC flip phone. That wasn't a capability back then. But we do, over the years, we've introduced responsive websites and video streaming and things like that, animations. So it's been a continuous, and that's what I say, part of our backlog of things is another refresh. We're doing another refresh this year because we're starting to think, okay, let's get ahead of that before people start to look at it and say, your website looks kind of tired. And we do that.
Now, so you started off your story telling me about that meeting you were having with everybody around the table, and 14, 15 folks, everybody was without wills. And I got to admit, I'm in my mid 40s. Every day I wake up, I feel a little bit more of my mortality, right? Depending on what I did the previous day, and like coaching kids baseball and being at practice, throwing and hitting and all that kind of stuff. And I wake up the next day, I'm like, whoa. And I haven't set up any of this stuff for myself. And I have the feeling if I took everybody in my office here, or if I took everybody on, that is in my circle, sat them down, like say I took half the people from church and sat down and talked about this, we'd get the same response here 20 years later, with all these services making it easier, more approachable, more affordable. So knowing that, I mean, tell me, would you say probably still the same case? And so how do we get over that? How do you convince a knucklehead like me, man, you're not going to live forever? And for me, it's like, and I know, like you said, all those people around the table know that it's important, that it's a responsible thing that you should be doing. And I think about, and it's so interesting because you go to bed every night not thinking about that, and your day's full, and you come up, and then I'm having a conversation with you. Now I'm thinking, okay, stop being an idiot, right?
Yeah. So a couple of things. We're trying to change the discussion a little bit from it being in contemplation of death. So writing a will is part of financial planning. You should have it, you should create it, and then update it throughout your life. And I think traditionally, because it's been expensive and inconvenient to do it, people tend to wait until that moment in their life where it's reached a stasis. I'm going to do it after we have the second kid, or we move, or something happens, and it's like, oh, now it's settled down. Finally, I can write my will. But it should be something that you look at periodically over your life and update it as your circumstances change. So we do want to get away from that idea a little bit that, I've had people speak to me and say, well, I'm getting this from my mum, but fortunately I don't need one yet.
Right.
It's like, what do you mean you don't need one yet? When do you think you're going to need a will? You can't write it, in moments before your demise. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So sadly, even now, like 20 years later, 65% of adults don't have a will. That's not changed. The needle hasn't moved on that since we've been doing it, and a number of other convenient options have popped up. That number really hasn't changed. So,
so the market's not saturated. You got lots of business.
Oh, yeah,
potential,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Millions and millions of people. So what I have found is that most of the people who come to finally write their will, there was a trigger. And whether that's, okay, I'm going in for surgery, or the most common one is my parent just died. They didn't have a will. They've left us with a complete
mess,
diabolical mess that we can't sort out. And I'm not going to put any of my family what my parents have just put us through. I don't want to, because I love my family, and it's irresponsible for me to leave an absolute, I don't want to use it. The PG version, you're going to leave them a mess.
Right.
And
a hot
and
mess.
Really, yes. And really, it's going to take you 20 minutes. And if you just take that 20 minutes, you're going to save your loved ones months and months and months of anxiety, stress, frozen assets, and a disaster. And so most of the people who come to us say, man, that I don't want to put my family through what I've just gone through.
Yeah. So when is in a person's life the ideal time, right? Let's just say they're getting done with their schooling, however far they take that. They're getting into the workforce or starting business, and they're going, should one of their first things they do be saying, okay, let's get this aside, and then I can just maintain it and keep it up to date over the years? Or
yeah. I mean, it becomes, obviously, the older you become, the more desperate it becomes. I mean, it blows my mind that, people call us and say, my mum's in a hospital bed. She has dementia. She only has 2 days to live. We need a will. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
You've left it till then.
You've missed the mark a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what about for those folks that feel like they don't have anything that they're going to leave behind?
Yeah. So it's a good point. So first off, the chances are your will's not going to come into effect today, right? Yeah. So you're going to accumulate assets throughout your life. So, and you're not, it's an important point to know that you don't list all of your assets in your will. So you don't have to update your will every time you buy a snowblower. Like you don't have to, it's your estate that you're dealing with.
Okay.
But also your will does a little bit more than that. It names an executor. You're putting someone in charge. That's probably one of the most important things it does. So, because what happens is if you die without a will, the first thing that happens is everybody looks at each other and says, okay, what? Who's doing what? Like, hey, why are you taking that? Well, he said I could have his guitar. It's like, well, no, hang on. He said I could have, and everyone's pointing at each other, and especially for parents with adult children, all of a sudden it's like, well, they said I could have the painting above the fireplace, and it's like, hang on, somebody's got to take a breath, settle down. Somebody's got to make an inventory of the assets. And let's start working through the process. We don't all just dive in and help ourselves. So naming an executor is important. And if you do have young children, naming a guardian for those children is a really important part of the will. And without that, if something were to happen to both parents, who's looking after your children? And that's written into your will as well. Yeah,
that's a big one. That is a big one. You just punched me in the gut there, Tim. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. But I can tell you as well, when people step through our service, we can see where people drop off. And these are the questions that people stop and pause and want to come back later because they say, ooh, naming a guardian for my children. Well, I know my sister's expecting that, but really, I don't want it to be my sister. Let's just step away and maybe even not come back to it because it's too difficult a decision. But if you're not making that decision, a judge in a courtroom is making a decision, and you don't want that either.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I can see where people are getting through that process and the tough question. Now I've got to. It's almost like in my head I'm picking favorites, but I've got to be in a place where I got to make the right decision, not necessarily the the decision that's best for somebody else. Yes, what would make my sister most happy is to become the guardian because that's what she wants. But what's her lifestyle like? What's it going to be like? How, that kind of thing. So
yeah,
wow.
do they share your values? Are they politically aligned? Like, there's a number of touchy-feelies that certainly if somebody independent was making that decision on your behalf and they're going to say, okay, what's your income? Where do you live? Okay, that sounds good. You're up. Whereas to you, there may be, like you say, if you're a churchgoer, maybe that's important to you. That's important to the way your children are raised.
So knowing that, when we know data, that excites me because I love knowing data about my business and where things get blocked off. Knowing that, how do you head it off at the pass? What are you guys doing to solve that issue? Is there something you do to kind of prep the person mentally when they come into this? Like, make sure you've thought about this, or listen, make a decision now. You can come back to it later. What's that look like?
So there's a couple of things we do. Firstly, we say, it's funny because on our website, we say, you can complete this in 20 minutes and you really can, but you don't have to. There's no rush. There's no, but we do say, get started. Because usually people will say, well, I've got to get all of my information together. No, just get started.
Is there a commitment before someone gets started on it so that they feel that commitment? Hey, I better finish this. You know what I mean?
We're going to email you. Like if you don't get it done, we'll send you a reminder saying, hey, don't forget, you were really doing well with your will. Come back and get it done. Because if you don't get it done, like all of the things I've discussed, you don't have one. So we will email you after once you get started. But the other thing we do is we partner with businesses like financial institutions, charities, employee assistance programs. We partner with a lot of these organizations that are trying to encourage people to step up as an adult a little bit. And it's like, okay, you've got your life insurance in place. Now it's time to write a will. We even companies like real estate companies, like you bought a house. Well, you should have a will.
You should think about this, yeah.
Yeah, so it's part of it, of being an adult. So partnering with businesses are not necessarily, funeral homes, those, your final demise type companies. They're more like responsible adulting type companies.
Yeah, interesting. So is your model more as a service where you're kind of getting folks in, paying for the service, getting their wills done, and then more things, or is it strictly transactional and you're trying to get as many people on you get their wills done as possible? From a business standpoint, how are you guys generating revenue?
Yeah, so the revenue comes purely from the service, writing the will. We also do financial power of attorney, medical directives, living wills, other estate planning documents. But we've also got some key complementary services that we charge for. For example, we have one called LifeLocker, and that's actually, we'll spend a few seconds talking about that because...
Yeah, for sure.
LifeLocker, so imagine a situation where something were to happen to you, you're in an accident, and your spouse is also in that accident as well. A sad situation. And oftentimes people name their partner as their executor. That person has a responsibility.
They're with you when the thing happens, yeah.
Right. So that person has a responsibility to gather your assets and distribute them to the beneficiaries. So you'll name an executor and also a backup. And that backup may be, you're a sibling. Could be your brother. Now, your brother now has the task to gather up all of your assets, all of your bank accounts, all of your insurance policies, your investments, everything, and then distribute them to the beneficiaries. So what insight do you think your brother might have to the scope of your assets? Probably not that great, right? So you don't have your bank account statements coming in the mail. You have everything coming into your email account. This includes your digital assets as well, whether you have a PayPal account, revenue streams from your YouTube videos. There could be any number of different assets that you have. So the executor has to somehow find all of these assets and then know that they've completed that task. So what we have, and that that may be even as simple as your parents. You're the executor for your parents' estate. Do you know all of your parents' assets? Maybe, maybe not. You have to make sure that nothing goes undiscovered. So we have a service called LifeLocker where you can list an inventory of all of your assets, keep it updated in the cloud, and then you can make it available to your executor. After you passed away, they log in as a key holder, and it becomes their handbook. All the people to contact, all of the subscriptions that you have that need to be canceled, all of your Bitcoin assets, your party poker, like everything that you have that may or may not be aware of, and it helps them to do their job.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool. So that's more of your kind of a long-term subscription-based product, right?
Yeah, so that along with actually the ability to update your will over time, they are subscription-based services. Cool. So we do have an initial purchase your will. You don't have to have the subscription. We don't automatically charge, or you don't have to cancel anything. But if you want these ongoing services, yes, you can sign up and have an ongoing subscription. And it's super affordable.
Awesome. That is great. So over the years, 24 plus years or so, how many people do you think you've helped write their wills?
Okay, so there's a few things that we can cover here. So initially, let's acknowledge that initially it was slow.
Yeah, that's okay.
There were not that many people writing their wills online, but we grew every year, and it was incremental.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happened was COVID happened, and COVID did a couple of things for us. One, it made people contemplate their mortality. And especially when there was that thing coming, that pandemic that was killing people and people weren't quite sure what it was. And it was like, this thing could be quite
a bit of a panic,
devastating.
Right? And so what should I do? Yeah.
Yeah. And what that combined with the inability to get out and law firms not being open. So people were looking to put their estate plans in place from the comfort of their home without leaving their home. We were able to furnish that and support that situation. So certainly, so we went 15, 16 years of growing steadily, and then it went bananas. And then I would say that over the years now, we've probably done over 1 million wills. But that was, I would say, in the last 4 or 5 years, yes, that's been a dramatic growth for us. But not only have we helped people to write their wills and other estate planning documents, but I think that one thing that we're proud of is that within people's wills, we have a page where we say, hey, by the way, have you thought about leaving something to a charity? Maybe just 1% of your estate or a little bit. It's not going to affect your main beneficiaries, but you could make a difference to a charity. And over the years, that page has probably generated about nearly $1 billion in planned bequests for different charities for people who have written wills using our service.
That's really cool. Yeah. So, over 1 million wills, that's nothing to scoff at. That's,
yeah.
I mean, the way I appreciate your humility, Tim. I really do. The way you started that off, you like, okay, let me preface this. It was really slow, and then it ran. Okay, but slow or not, over 1 million people, you guys helped get into a place when, let's say, they've run their course or unexpectedly run their course. That their families and their situations in a good place. So that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. And one thing to add as well is that we launched in Canada. We're now Canada, the US, we're in the UK, we're in South Africa. So we have gone multinational. We're still a lean company. We still operate like a startup. Yeah. We don't have, lavish Christmas parties or anything like that. We're responsible. But fundamentally, we're a bootstrap company who has done well, and we have a sustaining business model of charging people to write their wills.
Yeah, I'm reading a book that talks about one of the best levers in business that you can pull is that lever of creating something that you control that can be replicated without increasing expense as it goes, right? And that's what you guys done in a coding kind of way. You've created a software service that you can, bring to the masses. And every time you bring to the masses, it doesn't necessarily mean that your expenses go, proportionally through the roof. So that's
absolutely correct. And every incremental sale we get has no cost associated with it, other than, it may be a paid ad. Sending somebody over to us, but fundamentally, especially when we have the B2B relationships, if other businesses can send customers to us, then there's no incremental cost to it. It's a little bit, it's not quite as straightforward as we thought. Like, okay, this is things going gangbusters in Canada. All we got to do is replicate it in the US, and we're going to...
That's what I was going to say. What's it like going international, working in these different marketplaces and within different legal frameworks?
Yeah, so the service changes. It does. I mean, the law is different, but also the competitive marketplace is different across the different jurisdictions. Like in the UK, anybody can write somebody's will. There's no licensing or
okay.
So you can set yourself up. You can say, hey, I'm a will writer, and you can come to me and I can, as a consequence, there's a lot of will writers in the UK. You can't do that in the US and Canada. You have to be licensed to offer, to give people legal advice. So it is different. The legal framework is different across the different countries. And, for one example is that in Canada, we did all of Canada except Quebec for the longest time. And then eventually we did Quebec 15 years later because the law was different. There's Napoleonic law, like Louisiana in the US. We support all 50 states in the US except Louisiana because it's Napoleonic code.
What does that mean?
The will law for the UK and Canada was first written in 1837 and fundamentally hasn't changed so much since 1837. And Louisiana and Quebec are based off French law. So a lot of the terms that they use are different. A lot of the things you can and cannot do in a will are different. And they're very much a case of, the first male heir has priority over, different family members. And so
no matter what you write in the will, the law says the first male heir has the priority.
So I have to preface that by saying I'm not an expert in the areas we don't
That's
cover.
okay. That's okay. That's okay.
But
this is an interesting topic. Yeah, this is super interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's just best to leave that alone.
We haven't had a business case to go into Louisiana because for us, it's like going into a new country.
Yeah.
And we only did it in Quebec because some businesses were saying, you've got to cover all of Canada. So we did. We went into Quebec, and it's French speaking. So we had to do an entire translation of all of our services for Quebec, even though the business case itself isn't there for Quebec, but we've done it.
We've done it anyway. You kind of bit the bullet on that one. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm glad we got into that because that was one of the things on my sheet I wanted to touch on is working in different markets. What about South Africa? How'd you guys make the jump there?
And that was a business that wanted to work with us. So we went in B2B first into South Africa, and it's a different way that we've approached the other jurisdictions. We've gone B2C primarily in every other jurisdiction first, and then hope to gain enough exposure in the B2C market that somebody says, wow, I created my will. This is awesome. I should take this up to my senior management because we should get all of our clients to do this. And so absolutely. We've done that in Canada, the US, and the UK. And in South Africa, we wanted to have a business work with us first and then go B2C.
Okay. And how's that how's business going in South Africa right now? How
could be better.
Could be better. Well, yeah. And it's a different approach, right? B2B to get in, yeah.
Yeah, and the B2C market, there's also a lesson around spreading yourself too thin. Like, we've only got the same team. We didn't have a new team do South Africa. We've basically said, okay, everybody, now we have one more. Can we all just like do this one as well? So it presents its, there's a challenging one that we're asking all of our team to do what they did plus another 20% into South Africa. Really, we need to, set up a South African, president of VP software development or business development in South Africa and run with that. And maybe that's something that we do. It's somewhat new still, and we're reviewing it. We only launched it last year, and it's something that we need to kickstart it. We've got to do a little bit more there because, quite frankly, the competitive landscape isn't that difficult there. So I feel that there's more that we can do, but it's we've got to do more there.
Okay. So you mentioned your team and spreading people to kind of the point of their limits. What's your team size right now? How many people are on the team for LegalWills?
How many do you think?
Let's say, I'm going to say somewhere around 20.
Yeah. So we're at about, in terms of full-time employees, we're at about 6.
6, okay.
We have a marketing consultant that we work with, so not a full-time employee. And we bring in people for specialist roles like graphic design, software.
Kind of on contract, maybe.
Yeah. So the things that we do not outsource are software development, full-time employee, customer support, full-time employee, because they need to get access to our databases to offer customer support. So there's some things that we feel are proprietary that we never outsource. But things like, some writing assignments we would outsource as well. But we're still a lean team.
So digital marketing and things outsourced?
We've gone back and forth with that.
Sometimes we've done the same. Like when we started up, we outsourced, it worked well. And then the need for that was growing to a point where the expense was going to balloon because we need more and more of their time. So we basically we got to hire and develop a team internally. Yeah.
So our industry is very specialist. Our service is very specialist, right? So, we've looked into, third-party writing services, even writing tools, and they never quite get it. They never hit the mark for us. They never explain where we're coming from and the importance of writing a will and what we deliver in that experience. So we end up bringing it back in-house. And also with paid ads, it's never quite what we want in terms of the copy within the ads. So we've struggled a little bit with outsourcing to people who, they're writing about, hiking shoes in the morning, garden hoses, and then wills in the afternoon. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So we keep on going back and forth thinking, surely somebody can write some quality work for us. And still no. That's
literally a lot of what we were struggling with too, is that our business is doing so many different things. We're in a lot of healthcare stuff. We're in a lot of IT industry stuff. We're in a lot of different small to medium-sized businesses, because we're serving so many different types of companies. And when you're working with an outsourced organization, we had a really good one too, smaller boutique, very close to us. What we really needed more of their time to get involved in some more of our processes to really learn. And because me just telling, here's our vision, our mission, and, this is what, then you don't get the same. So what we do with our internal team is they're in our sales meetings. They're shadowing our people as they're, doing their job. So they're seeing impact happen real time. And then they start to create the stories in their mind that they put, into, some sort of visual or written copy style. So.
Yeah, it's super important. The more, I guess, specialist your industry is and your services are, it's really hard to outsource that stuff. I mean, for most of the blog articles that are on our website, I've written them. I've sat there and said, look, we really need to write an article about the importance of a power of attorney. Well, I can ask somebody to write that, but they're just going to go to other resources on the internet and cut and paste them. So I've got to have our flavor of that.
Yep, I agree. So one of the things, in trying to learn a little bit about you before we got together, was something you talk about often, I think, is that laws can't keep up. Tell us about what that means.
Yeah, or the legal, well, okay, so yes, laws can't keep up, and then if the law can keep up, the legal industry cannot. So, and I think COVID was a good example. So, we needed laws to change around creating a will and signing a will. And it just takes forever to get any kind of legislation passed that can help people.
What was the primary motive for needing those laws to change?
So the law required somebody to write a will on a piece of paper and sign it in the presence of 2 adult witnesses. That was the law. Well, you couldn't be in the presence of 2 adult witnesses.
That whole time.
It was as simple as that. And especially those adult witnesses cannot be beneficiaries within the will. So these have to be arm's length people from you. So, people were getting creative and saying, well, can I pass it through my mailbox or can I put it somewhere? And it was just, it was ridiculous. So they passed some emergency legislation to say, okay, you can sign it over Zoom. Somebody can watch you sign it over a Zoom call, and then you stick it in the mailbox, send it to one of the witnesses who can then sign it, and then they mail it to the next witness and they sign it, and then they mail it back to you. It's like, wow, that's pretty kludgy. But they said, well, that's now legal. We can do that. That's remote witnessing. That's allowed. And then you think, hang on. So the law in 1837 said that this will had to be written on a piece of paper and signed in ink, and then 2 witnesses had to sign it in ink. Is that the best we've got in 2024? That's the best approach? Because that might have been like state of the art in 1837. It's not anymore. And the idea that a handwritten scrawled signature is the best way for you to identify yourself. If there was ever any debate, it's like, did he sign this? Well, I don't know. Let's have a look at that signature. It looks like his signature. That's it. That's really the best we've got. That makes no sense. So, we have a number of ways of digitally identifying somebody and giving somebody an encrypted digital signature. And so what happened was that the law changed to allow people to firstly virtually witness, and then secondly, there's technology that will allow somebody to write on a signature pad and put that signature onto a piece of paper.
Sure.
And the law didn't allow wills to accept that. You couldn't do a DocuSign for a will. So no jurisdiction allowed that. So the law changed in some jurisdictions. So in Canada, BC then allowed electronic signing and also electronic storage of a will. You could put a will in the cloud. Makes total sense, because if your house burns down and your will's on a piece of paper, you've lost it. Hurricane, flood, any natural disaster, your will's gone along with you. So the idea that the law would allow a will to be uploaded into a secure cloud makes perfect sense. It's 2024. Why not? So BC allowed that. Utah, Nevada, some jurisdictions are now allowing that, the electronic signing and storage of wills. But then what happens is law firms say, we can't do that. I have no idea how you're supposed to do an electronic signing and storage of a will. Right. These are, you go into most law firms, they're still faxing each other. So they're not ready to jump on these technical advances. Companies like ours you can create your will online in BC. You set up a signing session with your witnesses. They get a signing pad on their smartphone. They all sign it. It appears on the document. You upload it into a digital vault, and your executor can access it after you've died. So we're ready. We partnered with digital ID firms to do this. But a law firm, so the law is slow, and then once they say, okay, you can do this, you look in BC, we're the only people doing it. No law firm has been able to actually pivot on this. And what they'll say is, well, we're waiting to see how the law shapes up. And it's like, no, you don't know how to do it.
So you mentioned something before when we were talking about your team. So everything that you've done and everything that's sustained in your system is you've got one software developer on staff. Does this person have kind of a team of people, or is it a couple people, or?
Yeah, there's a few people now.
Okay.
So yeah, we like when we started the company, my business partner was the tech developer, but no, we've got other people in because there's specialties that we need to work with now that require. Well, I think there's a couple of things. So firstly, after okay, I'm gonna talk about my business partner, who's an absolute software guru. Who's my best friend. We get on super well, but it gets to a point where it's hard to keep up with technical advances, right?
Yeah.
Right. And he once in a while he'll say, "Look, this kid is 23. The guy's a genius." I'm like, "Yeah, but Henry, you're a genius." And it's like, no, this guy's a real genius with the new stuff, right? So there's a certain passing of the torch that has to happen when you've been doing it for a while, and we bring in young whippersnappers who are sharp.
Yeah, and things are probably bombarding you, all these new gadgets or add-ons or things that you can do constantly. Should we do this? Should we do this? Is this a distraction? Is this an opportunity? All right, we get that.
So I mean, the obvious example now is AI. How you're going to incorporate AI into your business flow, the services that you're offering. So I go to Henry, say, "Hey, Henry, we got to be looking at this." He's like, "This is all kind of new, right?" So we need to bring in experts in that area who are on top of it and moving with it. And so Henry's moved into more of a supervisory role with some new technologies.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It's just one of those things. I think a lot of people think they want to go down that path, and they think they've got to have this huge team of specialized people to do all the little kind of nooks and crannies. And you guys here are doing it with a handful of folks.
Oh yeah. Well, I work, the big tech company that we used to work with is Nortel. And Nortel had a history of, we did well for quite some time, and then the company just folded. And I think the problem was that it collapsed under its own weight. And I remember there was a classic, we had 200 software developers building a product, and we needed to get it out faster. And one person said, "The only way we're going to get this out faster is to reduce the team from 200 to 20, and then we're going to get it out faster." And that's always stuck in my mind. Like putting more people on it is not going to make it go faster.
You're absolutely right. It's as a we're a people heavy company, which we love because we've got a lot of great people. But as we grow, we bring in more. Our team grows substantially, and if you're not good at that, you can quickly start to throw people at problems.
Yeah.
Without realizing that, hey, we can probably solve some problems with the people that we have, just using them more effectively and getting them involved on the idea side and things. So
yeah, and having somebody with the knowledge, and there's a few things, not just in development, but having somebody with the knowledge across the board, how changing this is actually going to impact that too. But also, our customer service team. Like, there is not a support ticket that comes in that we don't read. We read it all. We're still lean enough to know that when this customer says, "That made no sense to me," then we can say, "That didn't make any sense to that person. We've got to change that." Even 21 years down the road, I sent one to Henry this morning. It's like, this customer's right. This is an odd thing. We've got to fix this. So we read all of the support tickets that come in even to this day. And that's how we get our backlog of feature enhancements.
It's so important. Again, I love that you're telling me that, because it justifies kind of, we made this switch a little while back here in my company, is like, we have great, communication systems with ticketing or customer support and phone system can do great things. But I said, we've got to change the mentality of each one of us that, if somebody calls, they can leave a voicemail, we'll get back to them. I said, yeah, but if somebody calls and they leave a voicemail, the next thing they're going to do is call the next person on the list. So, our thing here is we pretend that there's no such thing as voicemail. Yeah, it's there as a safety catch, but like we've got to be of the mindset if something calls, they better be talking to somebody.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And we need, in order to keep lean, you can't have somebody in customer support answering the same question 45 times. Like, in order to keep lean, you've got to solve that problem so it doesn't come in again.
Yep, absolutely. Knowledge and knowledge base and communication and educating those folks.
Yeah.
What was it like being in e-commerce pre-2K? Pre everything you did with you've done with LegalWills? You said you were at Nortel and all this. What was it like being in that business? In the 90s and things like that.
What was it like working at Nortel back then?
Yeah, or even just being in the tech, on the tech side of things in business, as so much was changing in the 90s. It was that I kind of look back as the 90s is kind of like the puberty of technology. You know what I mean? Like everything that was happening was like a voice crack, a young boy growing his voice cracking. You know what I mean? It was awkward, kind of slow, so.
So I saw a few things and I've seen them repeat them. I guess, like it's kind of funny to talk about like Yoda. I've seen some things in my time, but like I've seen some big mistakes made over and over and over. And it's, one of them is, being lavish, like Nortel did it. Like when Nortel was doing really well, we would have Christmas parties back then where we had, Ray Romano come in and do the presentations, and we would get bands playing, to a small group of us that were like top of the game at that time. And then I remember back then when Nortel imploded and then a lot of people left there to go to Vim, BlackBerry. And then I saw BlackBerry do the same thing where they hired U2 to perform at their Christmas party. And it's like, okay, they're going down the same way. And then all of those people went from there to, I've seen the same, I have a friend down the road who works at Shopify. Mm-hmm. All of those young people at Shopify, they'd never heard of Nortel. And I'm like, you guys are living large at the moment, you just got to be a little bit aware that you may not be, maybe you want to be a little bit more fiscally responsible with your Christmas parties and your concerts and things like that. Because, and there's a classic down the road. Like I was at a party with my neighbor with a whole bunch of Shopify people, and the person said to me, "Well, the difference is I think Shopify have a broader range of products than Nortel." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Nortel had a book this thick of our products, and Shopify has a shopping cart." So don't feel that you're immune from, a financial downfall. I see that. And I think that's always been a part of our core belief, is that we're not going to spend any money that we don't have. We're not going to, even if we're doing well, we're not going to be, we're just going to be responsible. And we do feel as well, if people are buying our services, it's their money that they've paid for our services. So maybe we could have grown faster with some VC funding and angel investing and things like that. And somebody had thrown $10 million at us. But I've seen some of our competitors with $150 million of funding. And I'm like, what on earth are you doing with $150 million in funding? I don't even know how we'd spend that. We've always, lived within our means, and maybe we could have grown faster, but we're comfortable with the way we've grown.
And that's respectful for me, because we myself and my business partners, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time, because you're playing into this. We're good, we're healthy, but a couple things could happen and the wheels could fall off. Yeah. Or do we need to be more aggressive with building networks of people that may want to invest or getting involved with other financial opportunities that could bring more in so that we can do what we know how to do quicker, faster, and more of it. But there's, like you said, when all that money comes flushing in and you apply what got you there with what you started with to this new money, it doesn't mean it's all going to work out the same. right?
We still develop products faster than all of our competitors, services. And the e-signature is a good example. The digital signing and storage of wills, we were the first. We got it done. We didn't need a team of 75 software developers to do that. So we're still nimble and fast. And I think they're giving us a boatload of money to hire more people. Maybe we'd do more in the business development side. But certainly software development, we wouldn't necessarily build our team much bigger.
Because business development definitely isn't cheap, for sure.
Right.
All right. So let's move on to a little bit. Let's put the work aside. What do you do when you're not working in your business? What brings you joy? What kind of hobbies do you have? What's fun for you, Tim?
So a couple of things. I run a lot. I run competitively.
Oh, really?
And I've just this year got myself a new road bike. I cycle a lot. We have hills outside of Ottawa, the Gatineau Hills, so I get riding out there.
So do you swim too, or does that put you in triathlon world? Or
no, I'm definitely
you don't do.
Firmly in the duathlon mode. But I run and cycle, and I play piano as well. So I like my music.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I like my music as well.
So you write music, so you're a musician. How long have you been playing piano and writing music?
Oh, since I was a kid. Writing music's a stretch, but I play piano. One thing I found about playing music is YouTube's not your friend, right? Because you go on YouTube and you see just phenomenal people, and it's very humbling when you see phenomenal people on YouTube. And so, I play my version of music. I can play popular music, but then I go on and I watch people like, I started watching this drummer on YouTube and Jacob Collier and people like that who are just phenomenal musicians. And I think, that kind of makes me irritated.
Yeah, it does, but big scheme of, I play guitar, right? And I haven't been doing it all that long. I've played and been able to read music since I was a kid too, taking band class and stuff in school. And over the last few years, I've been able to spend time, getting involved with church and playing electric guitar. And it's been awesome. It's been such a blessing. And my kids, two of my kiddos, and one of them is going to be starting, I think, piano lessons pretty soon. They've been doing piano for a couple of years now with a local studio. And, when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all these other distractions, and getting in front of the piano to practice is like, my son will play Fortnite for 4 hours, but to get him to do 15 to 20 minutes on the piano is like, oh. And then the week of his recital, he's slamming in trying to get this thing down. And they're talented from a standpoint of, I think they hear the music well. They've got the coordination, and the studio does a good job. And so if you were talking to my kids right now, because they don't listen to dad at all when it comes to this type of things, it's like the eye roll, whatever, dad. Okay, dad. If you were to say, I don't need them to play 4 hours a day. I just want them to have that foundation of the principle and the creative nature of music and what that can to build in their life and stuff down 20 years from now. What would you say to them to make sure, hey, don't ask your dad if you can quit piano?
What I've done with my kids is I've taught them chords on the piano, so they don't do merrily go row your boat down the road, all of that kind of like classic learning the piano. I said, look, if you can play kind of like a guitar, taking a guitar to the piano, if you can play G and D and E and C and A minor, you can play a heck of a lot of songs out there, right? So they've learned the guitar and the piano that way. My sister's actually a piano teacher, and she doesn't like the way that I've encouraged them to play that way. But hearing your kids playing Olivia Rodrigo, I have two daughters who are 14 and 10, and hearing them playing Taylor Swift songs instead of, your classic piano conservatory type music, that warms my heart, because they're more likely to spend more time learning a new song by a popular female artist than they
Right.
are doing a recital.
Yep. And I'm getting some of that out of my kiddos too, especially my son, because he likes video games. And so he'll hear music that he likes in the game, and then he'll go and look it up on YouTube where they have these programs that are showing people playing it and whatever. And so he's memorizing in his head. He's like, Dad, can you get me the sheet music? So he did that, which was probably, I would say, a good year or two beyond his instructed ability to be playing what he was playing. And the first month or so of trying to really learn this piece by an actual composer, but he knew from playing the game, it was a struggle for him because he was having to do coordinating things with his hands that he hadn't been taught yet or had kind of that foundation built into. So it was frustrating. So at first it was like he didn't want that stress in his life, so he'd back off from it. But I just kept, you got to get in front of it, got to get in front of it, got to get in front of it. And he did, and he ended up getting in. And like me, what he does is he'll learn it. And then when he gets up to play it, it's just in his brain. It's not reading the music at that point anymore.
In fact, you have to. That's the way, and I kind of marvel at musicians who are just like they're not playing off music. They're looking at the crowd. They're slamming the keys. They're not hitting the wrong note. It's like, so it's muscle memory at that point. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's what I have to do. Because especially with the guitar, I haven't, like, growing up playing a saxophone, I knew the instrument very well. And it's, your hands are always pretty much in the same place. Everything's within reach. But with a guitar, I'm not so great at knowing where everything is on that instrument that I don't ever have to look down at it. I've string placement, no big deal. But fretting still is, I'm down here, I'm up here, I got to make sure I'm here and there. And so it's I can't be relying on the fact that I'm reading note for note. So it's looking at the notes, understanding the tab, playing it over and over again until I've just got it memorized.
Right.
And I think the nice thing about that, for me at least, what I've learned is it helps me be a little bit more creative within the structure of the song too. You know what I mean? So very cool. Music is fun. So you do marathons, or do you keep them shorter? What do you run?
I keep them shorter, 10K to half marathon. I haven't run a marathon. I don't like the idea of running until my body just packs in.
Yeah. I've known a couple marathon runners, and I've just seen their feet and how they get beat up. And I'm just like, whoa, no, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah. I'm like, when I've mastered the 10K, then maybe I'll do a marathon. I haven't mastered the 10K yet.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It's the kind of things you can do that it seems like it's super difficult, but it keeps you young. It keeps you healthy. And you're not a crazy person. I think you almost have to be a crazy person to be out in marathon territory. I've got a person I went to high school with. We're not super close now, but we keep in relative touch every once in a while. He's done a ton of Ironman races, and knowing him, I wouldn't have thought that would have been him, but he's got the mental fortitude to do those things, which is
the catch for me is I do have a family, so telling my wife I'm going for a 6-hour bike ride doesn't go down too well.
Oh, really? Okay. I've got a list for you when you get home, so you just go have fun for that 6 hours.
No, I'm going for a 6-hour bike ride, and I'm going to be useless when I get back.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really good point. When I was training to do a Spartan race, it was like my wife was so supportive, and she's like, get out there, do your training. But on Saturdays is when I would do my long trainings. It was more like weight and slight cardio in the week. And Saturdays I was building up to that 11, 12 mile thing with obstacles in between. And I would be gone for a couple hours on Saturday, and she never looked forward for that.
Yeah,
never looked, because it was the time when it was supposed to be family time, And
when you get back, it's like, are we moving this bookcase or not? It's like, no, it's not happening today.
I'm like in an ice bath and half dead and stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been great. This has been fantastic. I've learned a lot from you. I'll make a commitment to get my stuff together, and I'm going to get to your site and do what I need to do when it comes to putting a will together. You're right. Just thinking about it is uncomfortable, but I can think about what's more important than my comfort and getting things set for my wife, my family, my kids. If anything is ever, I travel a lot. I'm on the road a lot, and anything could happen. So
just get started, and it'll be done before you know it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. It
Well,
was
thank
great meeting you. Hopefully someday we can have you back on and you can share a lot of new stuff and cool things that you're doing. Thank you so much for your time today. And I wish you the best, Tim.
Thank you very much, Brian. I've really enjoyed it.